Hello, and welcome to my first election coverage, live from the brand new Spartan newsroom. I'm Kaitlin Petrillo. We're live all day today for our first election coverage coming to you from Michigan State's campus. Our guest this afternoon is Rachel Mourao, who is an assistant professor at MSU. Thank you for joining us today, Rachel. Yeah, so before you were assistant professor at MSU, I know you did a lot of stuff for political protests in Latin America. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so I was a reporter in Latin America, and I also study Latin American politics and how journalists cover protests in Brazil and elections in the U.S. So what I found was that when we reporters cover political events, we resort to official sources. So whatever narratives the official sources are pushing, we will follow that.
So is there a big difference in the U.S. political protests versus the political protests you were watching in Latin America?
There used to be. So what we had in Latin America in the last 5 years or so is a upsurge of right-wing protests, which have the support of conservative politicians. So those protests were portrayed positively because these official sources were pushing the narrative that they were legitimate. And this is kind of new for the United States. Traditionally, the left has been the one that protests in the United States. So right now, it will be interesting to see how more conservative or more right-leaning groups will start marching the streets, which is unusual for American politics.
So we're seeing more protests from both sides.
I think so.
All right, so what made you want to come back to MSU and teach in the States?
So I was a reporter in Brazil for a while, and then I got interested in doing research about what I did as a reporter. And then I came to the US to get a master's. It was still a professional master's, but that put me in touch with research, and I ended up staying.
And you work a lot with technology and journalism, right?
Yes, that's the main focus of my research.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about how technology has changed journalism, even just in the last 5 years here?
Yes, so technology has vastly disrupted the way journalists do events. If you look around us, we have a social media desk, which probably even 4 years ago we didn't have that. So absolutely it changed a lot, but at the same time, not really. It didn't really change the course of the norms and routines that journalists use. So what research has found is that journalists adopt new technologies, but they do bring the same norms and routines from traditional media into this new platform. So it's an interesting, at the same time you are adopting disruption, but you are normalizing the rules to fit traditional journalistic norms. So it's not a one-way street. Technology changes journalism, but also journalists change technology. Journalists really change conversations on Twitter. So.
And you're working at the social media desk today in the newsroom. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So I have a wonderful team there that's doing basically 3 things. One, they're monitoring social media conversations to write stories about them. So who is driving the narratives about the national elections today? Who is more powerful? So we found just now that during the morning, Donald Trump's tweets have been way more popular than Hillary Clinton's tweets. So that's part of what we're doing. The other thing is that we're monitoring our hashtag and my first election and see what our students are doing out there and curating that into a single content. So.
Okay. What are some major problems that journalists make while using social media?
I don't think that is necessarily a problem, but some innovation, some different things that have been going on social media refer to the role of retweets, for example. If a retweet has an opinion, should a journalist retweet it or not? So they're just new issues that, as a profession, we haven't really figured out how to go about them, how to remain impartial in a space that has a lot of opinion, minor opinion. How do we use humor, which has not traditionally been part of the public work of journalists, but now it's so important if you want to get traction in social media for you to have an element of humor in your content. So all those are not necessarily problems, but are challenges for us as journalists as an identity, right? How do we use those tools in ways that don't challenge the core of the profession?
While trying to keep an unbiased standpoint. Yes. So real quick before we wrap up here, do you have any advice for young journalists using social media today?
I do. I think what's really big and it could really help you get jobs later is if you build a personal brand on social media. So find your voice and something that's consistent with your personality and you think, this is what I'm good at. and try to work on that brand. Think about that, those platforms as a better version of yourself that you're putting out there. Of course, think responsibly. Everyone's going to see it. Even I see a lot of young journalists who say, but my Twitter is private. If you want to be a journalist, you cannot have a private Twitter. You have to have a public presence on social media. So think about, before going into those platforms, think about the image you want to push forward, and do this as an active process rather than just seeing how it goes. I think it will make your brand shine.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thanks again for talking with us today. You're watching live my first election coverage from the Spartan Newsroom on Michigan State's campus. Stay tuned all day for election coverage and interviews with Spartan alumni and live newscasts at both 6 and 8 tonight.